That's not a secret that going against the meta in Blizzard games is a punishable offense. Not because Blizzard will come to your house and punish you, of course, but simply how limited the build combinations often are. And so the builds straying out from the meta can be just not viable. As for now, every potent rogue build in Diablo 4 either has at least one poison component or wrapped around any kind of traps. And while those are really strong, I personally dislike that they require some positional tactical approach. I wanted to create a rogue that will have nothing of those and will be all about speed without a need to think one step ahead. Meet the Twisted Clone, incredibly mobile, gut-slicing rogue that is as strong as it is, in the words of a sound Hashira Tengen Uzui, flashy. Twisted Clone can clear the nightmare dungeons of 30 levels higher and solo butcher without much issues with its A tier in both AoE and a single target damage. It also has great AoE crowd control and a good boss stagger speed, but where it shines the most is mobility and survivability, with a lightning movement speed as well as 4 charges of flashy jump skills. It can both seed chaos inside enemy packs as well as going through the dungeon objectives in a matter of seconds, often finishing dungeons literally in 2 minutes or even less. At the same time, if grinding for XP and loot, you can just run through several rooms of monsters, gather them all together in the next one and still kill this huge pack without bothering too much about your safety. This build is wrapped around the Twisted Blades core skill and the Shadow Clone ultimate for extra damage burst and something else, together with the Inner Sight specialization, as well as Shadow Imbuement and 2 movement skills, Shadow Step and Dash. Your playstyle is a no-brainer. Simply engage into the enemy crowd, spam Twisted Blades and move across the battlefield as a lightning, slicing everything around. At the same time, the 2 movement skills at once plus the greatly improved evade are not just for the epic look alone. Due to moving so fast and also unpredictably, you will be avoiding large part of the enemy attacks already before your high armor and dodge will protect you from the rest. Secondly, due to the fact your core skill is moving with you and rotating around you, dashing through the enemies on a high speed actually increases your damage output, as this allows you to damage much more enemies compared to standing still, literally turning speed into damage. On top of this, thanks to the skill synergy, there is a huge pack of crowd control that this build applies to everything around constantly. Slow, daze, stun and knockdown, 4 CC effects that are often being applied altogether, so the large part of your enemies will never be able to not even attack you, but just to get up. The build's survivability is so high that it can survive through situations where most of other builds would have absolutely no chances, or just run away. For instance, like showed now, just look on that. Tons of elites, freezing walls, freezing shots, stun shots, extra lightning, poison and fire damage, and on top of that, environmental dungeon fix. Yep, still survived that. Or here, where my just level 65 character, still without most of the needed aspects and legendary items, was able to survive against a level 100 monsters event for over a minute. How all this comes together? Let's begin from the class skills. Our basic skill is Puncture. Its first upgrade allows to regenerate a bit of extra energy, and the second one, Fundamental Puncture, is a guaranteed vulnerability against bosses and the pesky elites anytime. Another its benefit is the highest attack speed between all basic skills, which allows to spend least time possible on using it and so leaving more time for core and the other skills. The core skill is Twisting Blades, with the Advanced Twisting Blades second upgrade. Twisting Blades is a kind of delayed kaboom. It has 2 hits. First one is a single target impale, and 1.5 seconds after, blades return to you, slicing everything on their way. Additionally, an aspect will improve this even further, making them rotate around you. At the build fully made, the initial hit will make less than 35% of total skill damage, when the Spinning Blades one will do the most. That's also why the crazy mobility of the build fits it so well. You can spam the skill quickly a few times and then dash around, avoiding incoming damage and stunning, dazing, knocking enemies out, because you know that the main part of the damage comes a moment later, which you can furtherly use to your advantage. Lastly, it's also a reason why the improved Twisting Blades upgrade is nearly worthless. The Daze effect there is applied only to impale, meaning to the first single target strike, and completely not affecting the AoE part of the skill. But you can still use it a bit at low levels, while you still don't have both movement skills and the imbuement one. The advanced upgrade is superb as it decreases cooldowns of all your other skills, the ultimate, imbuement and both dashes. In the same skill cluster also max the sturdy and siphoning strike skills for the increased damage reduction and lifesteal, which will be especially effective the more enemies are around you. In the agility cluster, take one level of Shadow Step with 2 upgrades, choosing Methodical Shadow Step as the second one, as it will help greatly to stun lock elites and add to boss stagger bar. Shadow Step is needed not for the damage itself, but for the mentioned stun, extra mobility and also allowing you to jump out of enemy CC as it makes you unstoppable. For the dash skill, we need all 5 levels of it, because each level decreases the skill cooldown. For the second upgrade, take the Discipline Dash, as the Daze CC is highly important to the build. Also in this cluster, take all 3 levels of the Weapon Mastery passive for extra damage, 2 levels of Rapid Gambits to furtherly increase mobility, and max Trick Attacks to add one more layer of CC and boss stagger bar feeling. In the next cluster, we only need to max the Agile passive. Only 3 seconds of the dodge bonus may look too short to be worth it, but with 4 charges of movement skills that you will be using constantly due to the shortened cooldowns, this bonus will be practically permanent. In the imbuement cluster, take one level of Shadow Imbuement with both upgrades, choosing the blended one as the second upgrade to help keeping the vulnerable status of the enemies. Also max the Shadow Crash passive to add AoE stun to your crowd control pool, and 2 ranks of Consuming Shadows for extra energy generation from enemy kills. In the ultimate cluster, we need the Shadow Clone with its both upgrades. This ultimate is highly underrated and incredibly effective if used well. Not only it almost doubles your damage with an extra aspect, it will also mimic your imbuement and so add even more shadow explosions and stuns. Lastly, you are unstoppable for 5 seconds after using the skill, which adds even more to the unchained mobility of the build. We also need just one level of the Adrenaline Rush to open the Haste passive, which you should max. It gives a great movement or attack speed bonuses depending on your energy level. Also take 2 ranks of the Aftermath passive to get an energy injection after using your ultimate. 2 ranks instead of 3, because 90 energy bonus from all 3 ranks almost always proven to be more than you will actually need, and so wasting some of the energy, while 60 is the golden middle. The last skill in this cluster you need is the Innervation passive to generate some extra energy. Our choice in the key passive is Momentum. It gives you absolutely crazy total bonuses while you are at 3 stacks of it after hitting stunned, dazed or frozen enemy or hitting the enemy from behind. This description may look that it will be impossible to keep 3 stacks on bosses, as they are immune to all forms of crowd control, but actually it's totally possible. More about this later. Your specialization is Inner Sight. The Twisted Clone is a very energy-hungry build, so having periods of endless energy often is great, and on the bosses it will be even more effective as the mark will just keep appearing on the boss again and again. The build uses 5 Paragon boards and 5 glyphs in total. The first glyph in your starting board is Control, that will give 115 bonus % damage to crowd control targets, which is, considering this build CC pool, equals just a permanent bonus against everything but bosses. The second and the one of the 2 essential boards is Exploit Weakness, that has great magic and rare nodes, and a legendary node that gives extra damage bonus against enemies the more you hit them while vulnerable. The glyph for this board is Exploit, that gives some extra vulnerable damage, but most importantly, allows you to make enemies vulnerable by simply attacking them. The second essential board is Leirana's Instinct. Its legendary node basically makes you invincible for 1.5 seconds every time your inner sight bar is full, by giving you 100% dodge chance. Well, nearly invincible, because 100% dodge chance does not protect you from the damage over time effects, but does protect you from any other direct damage, be it melee or ranged, and it's greatly effective actually considering how often it will proc. Moreover, this board features various powerful bonuses that activate every time you dodge. In this board, insert the closer glyph that will give you lots of damage for twisting blades and the extra passive 10% damage reduction. In the next two boards, Cheap Shot and Tricks of the Trade, we will be only using glyph slots, but not the legendary nodes, as spending Paragon points to take those is not worth it in our case. For the Cheap Shot boards, use the Turf glyph, that gives up to 80% damage bonus and 10% damage reduction against close enemies, which in our case is super useful as you are always engaging in the middle of an enemy groups. For Tricks of the Trade, use the Diminish glyph, that will give you good extra bonuses for damage against elites. This also includes bosses, armor and dexterity from the rare nodes around. As for the common, magic and rare nodes, distribution of literally every Paragon point you can see at the build calculator page. Items, aspects, sockets and elixirs. First of all the recommended item affixes are listed at the build calculator page, where you can see every single one of them. Secondly, a few words about recommended items themselves. The only unique item that is actually great for this build is Grasp of Shadow Gloves, that have great affixes and drastically increase your Shadow Clone effectiveness, but it's worth it only at the max roll to core skills and max, near max other rolls. Until you get those, use the regular gloves with the recommended affixes. As your ranged weapon, pick the crossbow. While you will not be using it anyway, the base affix is what matters here. The bow weapons have the % damage to distant enemies, while the crossbows have % vulnerable damage bonus, which is the heart of your main damage output. Now to aspects. Crossbow Blade Dancer's aspect, which is a huge damage dealing boost for core skill, and its effect is doubled because placed on the two-handed weapon. The first melee one-handed, Edge Master's aspect, which is basically a 20% damage boost every time your inner sight gauge is full. Second melee one-handed, Aspect of Retribution. This is both defensive and offensive aspect. Distant enemies are more dangerous to you, as the noticeable part of your extra protective bonuses are against close enemies, so stunning the distant one helps greatly. Secondly, with the stun being your main CC and being applied almost non-stop, this aspect second bonus is also a free 20% damage boost. Jewelry aspects. On your first ring, place the aspect of Imitated Imbuement, that makes your Shadow Clone to mimic your imbuement while also having increased damage. The second ring, Aspect of the Umbral, which is a superb energy restoration ability due to your highly variety of crowd control stack. In the endgame, if you will loot one more ring with good rolls that you can swap with your main ring, you can place the Energizing aspect on it and switch to this ring during the boss fights. In the amulet, place the aspect of Stolen Vigor, that provides you incredible passive healing. For instance, in my case, while it's great but still not the perfect roll, it restores 537 HP per second per stack of momentum, which equals 1611 HP per second as a passive regeneration. Together with your superb defensive bonuses and lifesteal, this aspect is another essential brick in your incredible survivability. Boots, Ravager's aspect. This one we are taking not even for the damage bonus, but for the extra charge and the ability to recharge it when killing an enemy with it, which is good against normal weak enemies. This aspect is a great addition to your mobility and the amount of unstoppable charges you can use, which is crucial for the melee build like this. For the pants, take Aspect of Disobedience. With it and the recommended item affixes, we will be able to reach armor cap or close, and with the crazy amount of hits the build is practically doing when fighting, you will be reaching the max amount of stacks almost instantly after engaging and maintaining them to the end of the fight. Gloves. As mentioned before, until you get the grasp of shadow with nearly perfect rolls, use the normal gloves. For those, use the aspect of surprise, which is a superb addition to crowd control with even more stuns. Even better here, that it drops stun grenades also when you evade, and there is an extra trick here just a moment later. Armor. Aspect of might. You are using basic skill from time to time anyway, and with its high attack speed, it takes only 1/3 of a second or so to get a free 20% damage reduction for the next 6 seconds and improve your defense. Helmet. Mangler's aspect, which is one of the most synergy crazy aspect in the build. When fighting enemies, due to your exploit glyph with twisting blades AoE damage, shadow explosions and the basic skill procs, the enemies around will be always vulnerable. Thus, you will be also making them dazed pretty often with this. But now even more comes in. Critically hit dazed enemies will be knocked down, while every enemy dazed will decrease your evade cooldown, effectively giving you infinite evade charges because its cooldown will be reset almost instantly when fighting large crowds, like shown now. You can see that while I'm using evade, its charge count simply doesn't go down because it's practically instantly refreshed. And now you do remember we also drop stun grenades at every evade, right? Sockets. Inject emerald, green gems into your weapons for even more vulnerable damage, ruby, red in your armors for maximum HP and so better lifesteal, and skull in your jewelry if you are on the Eternal Realm. For the Malignant Season realm, use the Calculated, the Clip Shot and the Cluster Munitions. Altogether, they will turn your stun CC into a simply infinite stun lock and add more knockdowns and slows against enemy packs, and against the bosses, greatly speed up the stagger bar feeling. As for the elixirs, your to-go one is the Sword Die elixir that increases dodge chance, as dodge is the essential mechanic that not only improves your defense, but also damage every time you dodge, so the more often you do so, the better is for your damage bursts. The Twisted Clone is a ridiculously mobile and tenacious rogue build that goes out of meta while remaining strong, being also super easy and highly satisfying to play with. I hope you have enjoyed this build and will have lots of fun playing it. Don't forget to enable channel notifications and join our Discord to always stay in touch and receive build advice in real time. Also remember that the entire build with every skill, Paragon points, item affixes, aspects, sockets and some extra notes are available at the build calculator page, linked down below in the video description. If you want to support me during the war and receive tasty perks for that, check out my Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee pages and my personal game key store. Thanks for watching and see you soon. Stay tuned, stay safe and stay happy. Sinitar here, signing out.